My name is Victor, and I'm going to be talking about Mexico's informal economy. We're going to look at an overview of the size of the informal sector, why is it so large, the consequences of this, and some possible solutions. Well, first of all, Mexico is a country with a lot of potential. It has a big manufacturing industry, a geographical location that works to its advantage, with the US being one of its greatest trading partners, large and innovative cities, and of course, a great place to spend spring break vacation. It also has problems, a lot of corruption, a lot of poverty, a lot of crime. You know, as a fun fact, in 2020, an article came out said that it is more likely to, if you're a journalist, it's more likely to be killed in Mexico than covering a war. And a large informal sector, which is a topic of discussion. How large? Well, 55.9% of the employed population works informally. As a comparison, in developed nations, this number is 16%. This represents 21.7% of Mexican GDP, an estimate. And Oaxaca is the state with the highest informality rate. Yeah, it varies a lot by state. As you can see, it's more concentrated on the southern states. And as we will see in further slides, informality and poverty are very connected. So in this map, basically represents a big problem in Mexico, which also wealth and income inequality. So why is the informal sector so large? Well, first of all, a historical context. From 1940 to 1970, Mexico had a period of massive economic growth. This was known as the Mexican miracle, where the average growth per year was around 6 to 8%. But then the oil crisis of the 70s and the inflation crisis of the 80s, it hit us very hard. And it decreased economic growth a lot, and it started pushing people a lot to the informal sector, since there was no demand in the formal job market. And since then, informality started rising from 23% at the beginning of the 70s to a large size we see today. And since then, Mexico has had an average growth of around 2 to 3%, which is low for a developing economy. This shows the GDP annual growth rates from 1970s to right now. It's been steadily declining, as you can see. And this is a correlation between informality and GDP growth. It's a negative correlation. And right now, we're basically in a cycle of stagnation. Well, where decreased growth creates more informality, and more informality leads to decreased growth in the future. Next is wages. Wages have also been declining since the 70s, and it was further exacerbated by the inflation of the 80s and the peso devaluation of the 90s. And well, this creates a disincentive for people to join the formal sector. Since wages are so low, there's no incentive to join it. And a study by the Department of Economics in Hermosillo found that real wages fell 45% from 1980 to 2010, and the real minimum wage fell by 30% over the same period. Here is the graph right here. As you can see, the real minimum wage declined a lot, and then since at the end of the 90s, it's been flat, which is also low. It's been going down. It's been going up in the past few years, but there are no studies for the real wage in that. Now, the third cause is the so-called Seguro Popular. This was a free social security program from 2004 that ended in 2020. They changed a little bit. Now it's called Insabi, but it's basically the same thing. It was intended to cover people without social security given by their employer, which IMSS, the largest social security informal sector, gives. Now, 4 different studies find a correlation between a rise in informality since 2004 and the presence of Seguro Popular. Well, this is because, as Jorge Huerta from Georgetown University put it in a study in 2009, quote, if they already have access to the benefits they may get in the formal sector, there is no reason why they should switch to a sector where they would face more constraints in taxes. And adding to this, IMSS, the primary program for Social Security in Mexico, has a lot of medicine shortages, and a lot of waiting periods, so they don't really have incentive to join formally just because of Social Security, since it's not really that good, even when it's given formally. And this graph, if you take a look at Oaxaca, the state with highest informality, it also coincides with high change in affiliation from IMSS to Seguro Popular from 2005 to 2015. So yeah, the states with high informality rates also have high changes in affiliation from IMSS to Seguro Popular. There's a correlation between informality and affiliation to Seguro Popular. And yeah, there are also other causes, such as lack of quality education. According to a study by INEGI in 2013, high school completion rates coincided with lower levels of informality in the future. And also Mexico, the business environment is very unstable. since there's a lot of political instability and turmoil, which causes and there are also like business bureaucracy, very costly construction permits, and in general difficulty in doing business, which also incentivizes people to stay in the informal sector, and also incentivizes corruption or people that do have money to bribe people to expedite the permits, let's say. And what are the consequences? Now, the main consequence is longer-term poverty. As I said before, poverty and informality are very connected. Fortunately, poverty has been decreasing in Mexico in the past few years, but a failure to address informality will keep millions of Mexicans stagnated. Right now, around half of the country lives below the poverty line. Around 10% live in extreme poverty. And yeah, I mean, poor people need more access to credit, healthcare, pension, and quality education, which are very hard to get if you work informally. And yeah, according to a study by Política Nacional in 2008, these 4 factors are negatively correlated with informality. This is by state, showing states with high poverty rates also have high informality rates. These are the top 3 informal states: Oaxaca, Guerrero, and Chiapas, which also enter into the top 4 most poor states. And this is the bottom 3. Again, low informality, low poverty rates. Now, another consequence is an increased tax gap. Mexico has a tax revenue of 13% as a percentage of GDP, according to Trading Economics. This is below the Latin American and Caribbean average of 22.9%. And well, an interesting study done by the World Bank in 2018, they did a study basically figuring out where is the largest tax gap for countries below the 15% revenue as a percent of GDP threshold. And Mexico ranks number 4 out of the 60 countries. And aside from this, tax evasion is common in Mexico and represents 6% of GDP. So yeah, there are a lot of taxes that are being unpaid in Mexico. Oh, and I forgot to say, this is not even taking into account corruption, which also decreases. There are a lot of taxes that are funneled through corruption. There are a lot of corrupt politicians. So yeah, but it's very hard to calculate the impact of corruption on taxes. Now, what are some solutions? What can be done about this informal sector? Well, maybe you've read the book Why Nations Fail by James A. Robinson. Well, in this book, they emphasize strengthening institutions to create more inclusive economies instead of extractive economies that only benefit a few, which is the case in Mexico. Now, strengthening SAT, which is basically the Mexican IRS, will help increase tax gap revenue, hopefully reduce the tax gap, and pay for higher quality social security in IMSS to incentivize people to move from the informal sector into the formal sector. But for this, I mean, there has to be jobs available for them to join. So because that's also a problem. And for this, there has to be more economic growth. And this can be done creating demand for more workers by reducing the inefficient regulations that I talked about in the business environment, which will increase much needed economic growth. And as a third one, more public school funding. In Mexico, there's a lot of problems on education, low high school completion rates, which affect work opportunity in the future. Basically, it forces a lot of people to work informally because they don't have much choice. They didn't have opportunity growing up. But more state funding in public schools with priority for states with higher poverty and informality rates, hopefully will help more people incentivized to join the formal rate and improve economic life. This is only one factor of the problems in Mexico, of the contributions to decreased growth, to inequality and poverty. But hopefully solving this will create, let's say, a ripple effect in the country. So thank you. Mr.